without understanding how people think and how and why they behave the way they do, without that understanding, you can't really provide great experiences.
You're tuned in to the Event Gems podcast, the podcast where coaches, consultants, and speakers learn how to produce transformational and profitable events. I'm your host, Natasha Wright, Chief Experience Curator at the Diamond Butterfly. Join me and other industry experts as we teach you how to maximize the power of your next brand building event. Time to drop those gems. Let's fly.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Event Gems. I'm excited to welcome Victoria Matey to the show. Victoria Matey is an event consultant. She's also the founder of Matey Events, which is a business events consultancy. Welcome, Victoria. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I am so excited about this conversation. Number one, because I was a psychology major in college and I listened to a podcast that you were interviewed on and you were talking about event psychology. And I just loved everything that you shared on that podcast. And so I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. I get a chance to combine, both of my passions, psychology and events. And I learned a great deal from the information that you shared. And so if you guys haven't heard of event psychology before, this is a great way for you to be introduced to it and also just pick up some tips and tricks along the way that can help you really conceptualize and monetize your events as well, right, Victoria?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk about event psychology, and every time I read about new research or new study, I discover a lot of connections with events, because obviously events are all about people. And when we know more about human behavior and human mind, we are able to deliver better experiences. So there is such a tight connection between these two fields. So I can't really imagine events without applying behavioral science or psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, the business of events is also a business of people. And I read a book called The Economy of Experience, I believe. I think I might have gotten that incorrectly. I'll tag it in the show notes when I'm talking about it. But one of the things that he talks about is that your events or the experience should really transform people, right? And so I think with approaching events in that way, with some of the things that you're going to be sharing with us, it's about like, how can we get to a place where we can provide value for our attendees and also provide a way for them to be transformed by the experience that we create, right? So can you talk about how you even got into this in the first place? Like, where did this concept come from? How did you get into it? And what exactly is event psychology? So I know I just threw a bunch of questions at you right there, but yes, I'm excited. I'm interested. I want to know.
It all started like gradually. It wasn't so when I first started doing, events, when I started out in events industry, I haven't made that connection to behavioral science or to psychology. I just, I've been working in events for a while, but at the same time, I've been interested in psychology since my first university probably. And I've done my degree thesis was on cognitive linguistics. And since then, I've read a lot of different studies and books on psychology, more on the popular science side, probably. But then gradually I came to understanding that there is that connection between events and psychology. And I started researching this field more deeply. And I understood that, I realized that, you can't really, without understanding how people think and why they behave the way they do, without that understanding, you can't really provide great experiences. And so, for the last probably like 3 or 4 years, I've been doing this work on event psychology specifically, meaning that I've been researching a lot of different elements, a lot of different things from psychology and behavioral science. And I've been translating that, as I say, into event language, meaning that I just wanted to make sure that people know, event organizers know how to apply behavioral science in events. And yeah, I mean, did I answer all the questions?
Yes, you did, for
So
sure.
basically, I meant to say that event psychology is about application of behavioral science and psychology in events.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that you said is you have to understand how people think. And so, based on what you were saying, what it meant to me is that you also have to understand your target demographic and understand like how your target demographic thinks as well. So then would you say it's important to niche down on your event so that you have a full profile then of who those attendees would be?
Yes, I mean, it's both, I would say both demographics and psychographics, because you need to know a little bit more about your attendees than age and occupation and whatever other metrics, demographic metrics there are that are important for you for your event design. So psychographics and knowing more about what interests people, what motivates them, what drives them to your event. This is what is going to be important when you design different elements and different aspects of your event.
Okay, got it. So you sort of started talking a bit about my next question, which was why is it important to have event psychology at the heart of any event design?
Well, I think it comes down to going deeper with understanding what are interests of your audience beyond the event as well. And you can do that, by simply observing and by simply surveying your audience. So when we collect feedback, it's about event and it's about something that is happening at the event. But we are also able to actually ask people about what they are interested about or interested in beyond that scope of the event. And so we are also able to observe, and observation actually is one of the most important and most valuable source of information. So this is something that we are not doing quite well. So it's not a widespread practice, I would say. And probably, you need some sort of talent for observing as well. So it's sort of that sort of skill that not everybody can have probably, but still, I'm sorry, there is a lot of things you can do and to receive that information, to gather information about your audience and to apply it in your event design.
That's awesome. I love that. So essentially what you're saying is you can do observation, but really rely on a professional, someone like you, to support you with that, right? Because
Yeah.
if it's not your wheelhouse or if it's not your skill set, then with everything else that goes into producing the event, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So if you did want to get those like specific metrics, then it's great to, hire out or get a consultant to come on board and support you with that.
Yes, absolutely. This is what I offer because I know I've been an event professional myself for many years, an event producer, and I know that it's a lot that an organizer juggles during the event process. And therefore, when you hire an external professional to do some tasks like observing and talking to your audience and providing you with the external perspective on how the event is going, this is to take some of the load off. And obviously from the point of having this external view from someone who is not as much involved into the process of creating the event, that gives the extra advantage in terms of how you evaluate the results of your event.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That definitely makes so much sense because, you're planning an event or you're an event organizer. You might feel like you're pulling your hair out. Like there's a lot of things that might not go the way that you planned or, things that came up last minute that you also have to deal with. So that's one of the things that you don't necessarily want to have to deal with. And then so from the observation perspective, how is that possible in the virtual world? Because a lot of people right now, they're moving to hybrid events or virtual events. So how would that observation process play in a virtual space?
Well, that's a good question actually, because with virtual we're still figuring out how to do it best. And I don't really have the answer yet, because it's obviously it's different, and we are just trying different ways of doing that. And because it's so much different from in-person live experience, we need to find the way, those ways that work best in a virtual environment. So we'll see how it plays out.
Awesome. Yeah. Since we're on the topic of virtual events, and I kind of wanted to segue into talking a bit about Zoom fatigue. That's one of the things that has, entered into our lexicon as a result of the pandemic. Everyone is talking about it in the event space. We're talking about how can you make the virtual event more engaging for people? How can you prevent people from dropping off too soon, like actually staying, if it's over a multiple day event, or staying throughout the whole day. So can you talk a bit about that, and what are some things that we can implement just to make the event more engaging and also reduce the drop-off rate?
Yeah, I think, event engagement, especially in the virtual environment, was like number one, $1 million question since massive pivot to virtual. And so I think there are a lot of ways from event psychology perspective that one can do to reduce the fatigue and to increase engagement. And to do that, we need to understand what is actually going on a brain level. And so first of all, we need to reduce the cognitive load, the cognitive fatigue, meaning that, and there are many ways that we can, use to make that load off the minds of our participants. For example, reducing the length of the sessions, or providing information in bite-sized chunks, because this is what is happening on a brain level. When we've got a lot of information, our brain just cannot cope with that amount of information, and therefore we get tired, we get overwhelmed, and we just can't process it. And so this is one way. Another way is to understand that people fear and hate uncertainty a lot. And for example, when we have attendees logging into the new platform, on a brain level, it's something that is completely new to them, that is completely unknown. And therefore, at that particular moment, they experience a lot of stress. And that stress influences how they learn, how they interact, that wears them out. And to reduce that uncertainty, one simple thing we can do, and to reduce that stress, one thing that we can do is to make sure that they are familiar with that platform. Maybe you can do some pre-event, webinar, or provide them with tutorial before the event, so that they can get a grip of how it works. And with that simple way, you can actually make sure that they are less stressful about something that they are going to experience, in the technical terms, the platform, right? And therefore that will contribute to the overall experience, meaning that they will be more relaxed and they will be ready to perceive that experience better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I did my first virtual event on a platform that was different from Zoom, I realized that I had to shift the way that I communicated with attendees, because a lot of people weren't familiar with the platform. They hadn't necessarily used the platform other than Zoom before. And
Mhm.
so they didn't necessarily like fully trust the process, or they weren't sure, how it was going to turn out. And so what I implemented or incorporated was that over communicate with them, like, hey, this is what you need to do, like every step of the way, keep them engaged in the process and what they need to do to have like the best experience on the platform. If there's anything such as maybe the platform won't work best in a particular browser, then just make sure that you add that into your communication with them as well. And so I really loved what you just shared, because I think a lot of times we're not thinking about how this could be cognitive overload. So it's like you have to think about going into a whole new space that you're not familiar with, and then getting information and retaining that, and trying to figure out and navigate the platform. It's like, ah!
Yeah,
So
but
it helps out
also,
them.
um,
Hmm.
yeah, it also, we need to understand that people might not even, think about it consciously. So they just experience it. And the best part about event psychology or the advantage of learning about event psychology for the event organizer is that you can pick up those things in advance and actually be aware about, okay, so this is something that potentially can cause some stress for the attendees. So how can I work on that and prevent that from happening? So basically you are working and implementing some preventative measures, right? And this is what will influence, what will impact the results of the event experience for the attendees.
Yeah, for sure. And then like one other thing that I do incorporate is a lot of the platforms, like they have, videos that attendees could watch so they could see what the experience is like. So, perhaps you can add that too as a link and say, hey, watch this video, get yourself familiarized with the platform. So at least like going in, you already know, the lay of the land and what you need to do.
Yeah, there might be very, very simple ways. Actually, you don't need. I mean, I mentioned webinar, and I know that some organizers did it, but it can be as simple as just providing them with a guide, like with PDF document where
Mhm.
you just outline all the steps, and that might be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And then, so I know so I just wanted to go back a little bit. You talked about cognitive overload in terms of the length of the sessions that would prevent that. Is there a particular length of time or frame of time that you would say sessions would last? And let's say, maybe you could talk about presentation. So if it's a single person presenting, and then if it's a panel discussion, because those are usually a little bit lengthier. So can you talk about, what a sweet spot for the length of time should be?
Yeah, I get this question a lot actually, but there is no, research or specific time that scientists would, tell you that, okay, so you've got 15 minutes or 45 minutes and that should be your goal. So there is no such thing. And but by testing and again observing and indirectly from different other studies and research, we know that the best way to do the best length might be about 20-30 minutes. And it doesn't matter really if it's a panel or if it's a single person presentation, because I mean, yes, they tend to be lengthier for the panels just because there are 2 people or 3 people talking, right? And it just makes it all longer. But in fact, from psychology perspective, it just doesn't matter if it's a single person presentation or a panel. So what also you should bear in mind when creating the timing or planning the timing of the sessions is that when you have longer sessions, it's probably a good idea to introduce some breaks within that session so that people could have that time for reflection, for thinking over what they've just learned.
That's interesting. So then what you're saying is, let's say, for example, because sometimes I've seen like panel discussions, they might be like 30 minutes, and then, there's like maybe another like 10 minutes or so for Q&A, 10, 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So it really makes it about 45 minutes.
Mm.
So then what you're saying then, if it is a lengthier session, then right after that lengthier session, introduce a break so that attendees could get a chance to cognitively recover and absorb the information.
Yeah, they would need to actually think about what they just heard, and maybe they've got some ideas while they were listening to a presenter, and they need to process it on a brain level. It just you need some time so that this information settles, and we usually skip that. And we do no good to our attendees when we do that. So, and I know that it starts to change, but it's, in my view, it's pretty slow process. And we need, when we pivoted to work during this pandemic thing, I feel like a lot of organizers started to realize how damageful that was to have 1 hour plus sessions. And I think that we are now coming back to in-person events. We are now going to have much less lengthier sessions than we used to have before.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And then, so would it be, let's say you did have a shorter session, a 20-minute session, then, right? Do you still build in a break after that 20-minute session, or or is it just for the lengthier sessions?
Yeah, yeah, I would, it would depend, of course, on the specific event and the specific agenda. So you can go about it in different ways, but I would argue, and I always advocate for having more breaks, and actually lengthier breaks than 10 minutes is not enough, because it's more like a restroom break rather than a brain break. And for brain break, we may have the same 20 minutes as the session, timing. So I would definitely suggest to have lengthier breaks as well.
So no restaurant breaks. Give them a cognitive break, something a bit more
I mean,
substantial.
well, it's not either or you can have both, like restroom breaks, and you have brain breaks as well. So
Okay, okay, so mix it in is what you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
Variety is a spice of
You
life.
know, I feel like a lot of organizers just are afraid of having those lengthy brain breaks because it feels like there is nothing going on. And visually, like on the outside, literally nothing might be going on. Like people just think and they process information, and you can't really justify probably to yourself when you organize and you put it into your agenda, and how do you go about it. But if you know what impact it has, literally on the outcomes of the event, of the outcomes of the event experience, then this is how you justify it.
Yeah, that's super helpful, especially for people who are service providers. And if the event is really around you showcasing your services, your products, your skills, and also for you to be able to cause transformation for someone, then you want them to be able to have that moment, that break to really process the information, because then, I feel like it was all for nothing then, right? You had this wonderful event, people showed up, they had a great time, but if they didn't retain the information and are able to like implement it in their lives in some way to really transform themselves, then it's like, what did we just do this for, right? So I think that that's super, super helpful tips. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us. So let's talk about the paradox of choice. One of the things when I was listening to the podcast that you were on, you talked about that. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. I think a lot of times we tend to give a lot of choices because it's like, okay, well, we're giving you options, options, options. You choose the one that's best for you. But in fact, what you're saying is that there should be like a threshold on those options. So can you explain a bit more about the paradox of choice for us?
Yeah, sure. Paradox of choice is very, very interesting concept in behavioral science and psychology. And it essentially about that we naturally assume that more choice is better. But in fact, what research showed to us is that having less choice is better. So when we've got a lot of choice, we get paralyzed with that. And there was an experiment, a famous experiment, it's called jam experiment. When people were offered in a supermarket, I guess, they were offered to choose from either 6 types of jam, or in the other case, 24 types of jam. And paradoxically, when they had less choice, meaning 6 types of jam, the sales went up in that scenario, while with 24 types of jam, the sales went down. So that means that when in events context, it means that when we have a lot of choice, a lot of options that we offer in event agenda to our audiences, it may actually cause them to feel more stressful about what they are going to choose. They may feel overwhelmed with that choice, and that leads to worse experience. So when we are trying to cater for different needs and for different needs, we need to also remember that a lot of choice, a lot of options does not necessarily do good to our attendees. And that means that we need to find the balance between offering something unique and catering to different categories of our attendees, and not overwhelming them with choice.
When you said that, I was like, I can so relate, because I think about the nights when I'm trying to watch a movie on Netflix, and it might take me an hour, like,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, I can so relate to, it's basically probably, yeah, the most common example from our lives that we all experience somehow, right? It's like
Yeah.
going to Amazon to choose something, or
Oh my
going to
God.
Netflix, it can feel very, very stressful.
Yeah, yes, for sure. It's like, well, I could have watched a movie this whole time. The time that it took me to find a movie to watch, I could have watched a movie. So it's like that's the paradox of choice. I have
Yeah.
so many choices.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you apply that, metaphorically to event context, so that means that you need to be careful about offering a lot of choices, a lot of options to attendees.
Absolutely, absolutely. I so agree. And then, so as we're talking about choices, so you just talked about, pretty much like the event framework and, what you can include, right, with regards to the choices. Does the paradox of choice relate to ticket sale, or the structure of tickets? I know a lot of people, they might have like different options. They might have a VIP, regular ticket, free ticket, and add in different things from there. So does it relate to that? And is there
Yes.
anything that we could do when we're setting up our ticket sales to allow for attendees to take immediate action on maybe a higher ticket tier that we have?
Yeah, well, first, yes, paradox of choice would also apply to that. And when it comes to sales, particularly, there are other concepts that might be applicable concepts from behavioral science and psychology that can apply to sales, ticket sales. And I think one of the most common techniques, and the one that we also experience in our ordinary life, is scarcity technique. I'm sure you and your audience encounter that when you go shopping, or when you go to an event and you buy a ticket, there is always that line that don't miss a chance, or so many tickets left, for example. Or if you go to sites like Booking to book a hotel, then you can see so many rooms left. And that's actually application of scarcity technique, because when people experience something that is a scarce resource, they are more likely to act on that. And that is widely used in retail, and it is something that we can use in events as well. And another thing which can be applied to sales is anchoring. And that means, so in I think it was 74 when the first experiment was done by researchers Kahneman and Tversky. And what they did, they asked participants to spin a wheel with a number from 1 to 100. What participants didn't know was that the wheel was rigged to show either 10 or 65. And so when they did it, then they answered two questions. The researchers asked them if they think that the percentage of the African countries' membership in the United Nations was higher or lower. And the second question was, in opinion of the participants of that study, what was the percentage of membership in their view. And so what the researchers found, that those participants of the study that saw the number 10 when they had on the wheel, so those who landed on 10 on the wheel, they estimated the African countries' membership was about 25% on average. And those who had 60 on the wheel, they said that it was around 45. So in other words, the number of the wheel, it was random for them. It was as an anchor for their mind. And so we can use that in events when we promote our event. We can use that, for example, when you have a discount price next to the original price, that's gonna influence how your participants perceive the numbers and the price. Or basically what can influence their decision to buy a ticket or their perception of the price is any number that they can see next to the number defining the price of the event. And so, for example, I saw on Event Manager blog when they started doing their online events, and they had, this sort of page with listing the different pricing. And initially what they did, they stated like, you can pay $25, you can pay $50, you can pay other amount, and that 25 served as the anchor. So people unconsciously anchor that to what they were allowed to pay any of that price, or even go for free. You can choose like a free button and then press it, and don't need to pay anything. So basically that $25 item was serving as the anchor for people to choose whatever they want to pay. And so this is how you can, what you can do about ticket sales.
Oh, that's so interesting. And what's interesting about that study is that the ones who landed on 10, they chose a higher number than the ones who had a higher number.
No, the ones that landed on 10, they said it's about 25%.
Okay.
And those who landed on 65, they said that the percentage of membership is 45. So it's sort of, they anchored. So the lower number of the wheel on the wheel meant lower number that they said answer to the question. So the higher number led to higher number that they, in their answer.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so I understand it a little bit better.
So basically, yeah. So those numbers that they got on the wheel influenced what they answered to the question, although those numbers completely
out of thin air.
Yeah, I mean, they are random. They just don't really, and they do not correlate. So the question the question did not correlate to the wheel thing. So it was completely random, and still it somehow influenced what they actually answered. And this is just one of the experiments in the anchoring field. So there were other experiments that showed that there is this tendency for people to be anchored, and this is how it can be used when it comes to ticket sales, for example.
That is so fascinating, because I really think that, you could test it out too and see how it works. Maybe you could do your own testing on maybe different landing pages and see which one converts more. And if you have a higher anchor number, would you get higher ticket sales? So I think that is, absolutely brilliant, and a great way for us to like shift our mindset around how we could do pricing, or how we can shit on the registration page.
Yes.
Because what I heard you say is it's best for those numbers to be like side by side or next to each other. And I know like sometimes when we go on to purchase something, they'll be like most popular option, and you're like, oh well, this is the most popular option. I think I'll go with that one.
Yeah. No, when it's next to a price, it's in retail. You can see it regularly, probably when there is a discount price and there is an original price, and so you sort of compare in your mind, right? And this is what serves as an anchor to you.
Yeah, because it's basically like, well, this thing is worth more. It's a higher perceived value. And so you're like, wait a minute, I am getting a discount here. I have to be careful of that when I'm going to the supermarket myself, because sometimes it will say 3 for $10. And then, when I really look at it, the thing was, $3.33 anyway. So it's like,
I know.
But that whole pricing psychology is super important, because had I not taken that few seconds to think about it, I would have been like, oh my God, I'm about to get a great deal. Let me pick up 3 of them.
Yeah, I think what you are saying is very important, actually, to understand that people are not really stupid, and you don't want them to get caught into some manipulation thing. It's just that obviously we are not talking about that. We are talking about providing value and also making their decision-making process more simple for them. That is all it is about, not about manipulations, really.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. And thank you for bringing it back to that. Because
Because it's something that I'm thinking a lot about myself, and I get questions about that, and I know that in research world, in the science world, there are a lot of debates about the ethics of applying those kind of hacks and tricks from behavioral science, because if you know that this is going to work unconsciously, and people would not be aware about something, how ethical is that, or this or that technique. And so yes, I think it's important to understand that in the first place, are you to think about things like, are you providing a value for real?
I was just
And
gonna say that exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when you were saying what you were saying, because it's like you still, in terms of the pricing model that you do use, you still have to make sure that you're providing that for the amount of money that the person is going to pay, that they're getting the value, right? So yes, it might be a perceived higher value, but still the value on the money that they actually
yeah,
pay. So
exactly.
that's such a great point, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think that that's such an important thing for us to think about too. Ethically, how are we moving through some of these things that we're learning right now, and as we shift and learn, how can we constantly like have that in the back of our minds, so that it's not manipulation, but it's more so a value add that we're providing for our attendees. Okay, awesome. I love that. All right, so I just wanted to, quickly close out, but before I did, I wanted you to just share three event hacks that we could use, or three things that you think that every event organizer should pretty much have in their toolkit.
Okay. One of the hacks I always advise to organizers is that when we survey our audiences, we always ask about their feedback. But instead of asking feedback, just change one word, change it to advice, because and there were studies about that showed that changing just that one word brings much better results, because when you ask about advice and not the feedback, it means that you're talking, or you're suggesting that the person that you're asking advice from is, you're treating them on the same level of expertise. And so people feel like they can provide value back to you, and they're more eager to do it, to answer your questions. So just changing one word can significantly impact the outcomes of surveying your audience. Another thing is that I would say, another or advice that I would give is that when you design event experience, you need to think about ways to appeal to both rational and irrational systems in our brain, and that way you would get more compelling results. And the third one is that you need to really think about how to manage attention, because I used to say that attention is the new currency, and what people focus on is what they remember. So managing attention in the right way will make your event more memorable. And they have very tight connection, very tight link, attention and memory. And so if you want your event to be memorable, you need to manage attention in the first place. And there are many ways of doing that. So I think we just don't have time right now to go more into details about that, but just make sure that you focus on attention, pun intended, much more than on any other elements in your event design.
Awesome. And I always like to ask, like, what is one last gem? So you gave us a lot of gems just now with the events. So give us something else that could be like life related. I would love to hear one last gem that you'd like to leave us with.
I started doing, or researching more the question of productivity, and at the same time the issue of well-being, because the profession, the job of event planner is very stressful and overwhelming, and with virtual events I guess it became even more stressful. So I would suggest using event technology to the benefit of event planner, not only for the event itself, but there are a lot of event apps that tackle the problems of well-being and health and productivity. And so there are a couple of apps that I would like to recommend to event planners, those who probably haven't heard about such tools. They are behavioral, so science-based apps, and they're called Fabulous. And the other one is, I think I like Forest as well. So I would really, recommend to check it out because they have a lot of good techniques and that will help you in your daily life, professional life, and they may help you to establish good habits and to increase productivity and take care of yourself, essentially. And I think this is very important, especially now when we are still in the middle of pandemic and we're doing virtual events, and we need to take care of ourselves.
Hey, I love it. And I use Forest too. So
Oh, you do?
yeah. For me, I was like, how can I increase my productivity and have better time management? So I actually downloaded that app.
Yeah,
I haven't
this
heard of
is
the other
one
one.
of my favorites,
Yeah,
actually.
it locks down everything. So you guys, I'm gonna provide the link in the show notes so that you guys can go ahead and download that app. And then the other one that you mentioned as well, Fabulous. So I look forward to checking that one out too. So thank you so much, Victoria. This was an awesome conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. You dropped a lot of gems, and I know that everyone listening, you guys could certainly use them, implement them, and help you with planning out your strategy for your event. So Victoria, can you let people know how they could find you, how they can stay connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got my website is matey.events, and on the website you can find a section which is called event psychology, and essentially it's a collection of different research and links to articles and other references that might be helpful for you when you figure out different elements of applying behavioral science to events. And you can also find me on social. My handle is Matey Events. And my last recommendation might be, my last advice is to check out the online course that I have on event psychology. It is called Event Psychology, and it is on Thinkific platform. So if you want to learn more about how to apply psychology to events, you can go and take that course.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining me here. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to Event Gems. Until next time, we'll see you soon.